Can I have your attention? Thank you for being here. Who's concerned about public health?
Right here.
Right. My guess is that only in the times that we take it for granted, pretty much all of us are always concerned about public health, particularly if you are suffering from one medical condition or another. So as a society, public health is way up there as a priority, high priority. As a result, we have governmental agencies that look to protect us. FDA, CDC, Department of Health and Human Services, the Connecticut Department of Health, and our local health directors. We pay money to have people protect us. And when we go into a supermarket, we want to feel that what we take from a shelf is something that's safe and good for us. If we go to a doctor, we want to feel that whatever the drug might be or the treatment recommended, that it has been vetted and we are content and assured that that will be good for us. We all depend upon sound personal health and public health. So now we're involved in a great debate about the use of marijuana for medicinal purposes and for recreational purposes. So in the course of this debate, we should ask ourselves, what do these agencies say about marijuana? What does the Federal Drug Administration say? The FDA is responsible for protecting public health by regulating human drugs and biologics, animal drugs, medical devices, tobacco products, food, cosmetics, and electronics that emit radiation. Marijuana is on a Schedule 1 of prohibited substances currently. So the Federal Drug Administration has determined that it is illegal. So what does the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services say? Secretary Alex Azar, in March of 2018, stated, "There really is no such thing as medicinal marijuana." What does the Center for Disease Control say? The fact that marijuana is legal in some states does not mean that it is safe. CDC goes on to say that the marijuana plant has chemicals that may help symptoms for some health problems, but there isn't enough research to show that the plant works to treat or cure these conditions. What does the state of Connecticut Public Health Department say? Basically, nothing has been said by the State Department of Public Health. They have taken no position that I can determine. What does the Connecticut Association of Local Health Directors say? And Steve Civitelli, who provides that service here in town, is standing down here. He can correct me if I'm wrong. That association says they concur with the CDC. Researchers do not yet know the full extent of consequences when the body and brain are exposed to high concentrations of THC. They point out also to concerns about marijuana's adverse health effects on heart health, cancer, lung health, poisonings, and the developing brain. The association has voiced opposition to the retail sale of marijuana. In spite of this, we now have a state law that authorizes medicinal marijuana for over 35 different conditions without any indication from researchers or studies that it is appropriate or recommended. Now we seek to legalize recreational marijuana without, again, any determination of consequences. No determination of safety. Do we have a current example of something that has happened where there wasn't appropriate testing, and what were the results? Gee, let me think a minute. What is the current example? Well, something comes to mind. I think I read something about opioids. Opioids were approved for short-term use. Then they were allowed for long-term use. And there was no testing done to determine that that was appropriate. And what is the consequence to that? We have an epidemic the size of which I don't think this country has seen before with the opioid epidemic and the casual belief that using OxyContin or something else for a long period would not create an addiction. So here we go. Hold on. We're going to follow the same pathway again? Now, I'm not here to say I'm opposed to marijuana, because if marijuana has truly beneficial results, I think we should all support it. My concern is that there is a failure to follow proper procedures, and in a free country that is built around law and upon sustainable, dependable processes, how do we excuse that with the risk involved here if it's anywhere close or even a small portion of what has occurred with the opioids? You know, the United States Department of Health and Human Services, in a statement, indicated that $13 billion has been appropriated by the United States government to combat the opioid crisis. Of that, this year, 2019, there is $750 million now being used to develop new pain therapies that will be alternatives to the opioids. I ask, we all should ask, why is not marijuana one of those substances being researched? But to my knowledge, it's not. So there's money available if we want to do research. Why are we not doing that research if we're looking for alternatives to opioids? Certainly the FDA can appropriate studies. In fact, Epidiolex, which utilizes a purified form of a chemical found in marijuana, has been approved by the FDA, along with a couple of other very specific drugs. Testing occurred, they have approved it. Why is it not testing further than that? I don't have the answer to that, but I think we need to pose that question. And if there's a reluctance or unwillingness on the part of FDA to do it, then certainly we have federal people who can correct that in law or other procedures. So some of the consequences of the failure to comply with federal law are that doctors cannot prescribe marijuana. They recommend its use. They can't prescribe it because they could lose their licenses. Can hospitals use marijuana? No, they're accredited by federal agencies. They can't use the marijuana. We've set up a system that doesn't work. All we need to do is comply with the standards our society is built upon. What is law? What is not? And if we think that something's wrong about a law or regulation, then there are mechanisms to change that, rather than risk every individual's health by ignoring the correct process. The FDA process involves an investigational new drug application. The Drug Enforcement Administration reviews the registration application filed by the researcher. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA, within the National Institutes of Health, provides research-grade marijuana. If you're not assured that the same grade of marijuana is being used for all of the clinical studies, there are too many variables. Your study is not worth anything. This is standardization. This is science that needs to be applied. It's not emotion. Emotion creates a mess. We need to apply the standards we now have and the science and look to protect the public health of every person in this state as well as across our great United States. I thank you for your attention. I ask, everyone should be asking officials, how can we correct this, put it on the right path, and if this is something good, we'll all be behind it, because I'm in favor of good health, as are you. Now, we have some other people up here, and we have the State Senator, Len Fasano, we have Representative Craig Fishbein, and we have Mike Frieda, who's First Selectman in the neighboring town of North Haven. I'm going to start with you, with your pardon. Mike, would you like to say something?
You're on the wrong side of history.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dickinson. When Mayor Dickinson asked me if I would be willing to appear and speak before today's event, little did I realize that I would be coming here from a wake and funeral of a long-standing North Haven young man who passed away from substance abuse. So forgive me if my commentary borders on a little bit of being despondent. So I'm here to offer my opinion on recreational marijuana. I've seen very clearly in the 9 years that I've been in office how substance abuse and opiate abuse has taken the lives of many young men and women, not only in North Haven, but also throughout our communities, our neighboring communities, and across the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, substance abuse is an epidemic all across the country. And we as local leaders are doing everything we can to help create awareness and to help families who've suffered losses from opiate and substance abuse. So recreational marijuana, I'm very concerned with for two reasons. I've not seen any studies to indicate that it is not a gateway drug. And I'm very concerned about legalizing something that could be a gateway drug. Secondly, many of us as municipal leaders, including these fine men behind me, Senator Fasano and Representative Craig Fishbein, we work very closely with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I've seen no studies that indicate that legalizing marijuana will not create an accelerated level of impairment. And down through the years, we have had our hearts crushed with people who have been killed in drunk driving accidents. So I'm very concerned about the level of impairment. Those are the two main issues that are rolling around in my mind as it relates to recreational marijuana. and unless there are conclusive studies to refute those two dilemmas I have in my mind, that's why I cannot get behind recreational marijuana. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words today.
Thank you, Mike Freda. Senator Fasano.
Thank you, Mayor. And a lot's been said, so I'll keep my comments brief. Let's just say this. When you talk about marijuana, recreational marijuana, the first push of the Capitol was, well, we need it because of our revenue. We need it because of our budget. Let's just say what's absolutely clear about that. That's absolutely wrong. Denver has shown that has a negative effect upon the budget. There is not a net gain to that state when you take in the social setbacks that are caused by it and the law enforcement that's caused by it. There is no test to determine if someone is driving under the influence of marijuana when they drive a car. The enforcement would be lacking. So it's not an economic reason. And even if it was, we're going to sell our souls to fill our coffers? Is that what the argument is? Because if you open that Pandora's box, there's a lot that we could be talking about legalizing if the standard is what is going to be the dollars in our bank. That is not the standard we should be looking at. We as policymakers need to look at, is it a public safety risk, yes or no? The answer is yes. Most reasonable minds would argue there's no public benefit to recreational marijuana. The second question is it therefore safe for our society? And I think most people would say, no, it is not. To argue you're going to take it off the black market is to argue that a store that has an increased cost of an overhead, an increased cost of the labor, an increased cost for the taxes and the extra tax the bill in the various committees talk about is going to be cheaper than buying it on the street. You're not going to get rid of the black market. In fact, you're going to enhance the black market. You only need to look at Denver to find out whether that's accurate or not. You can get it cheaper there. We've seen that happen. So the final issue that's left, is this a good direction for our state? It is against the federal law. When I question, how can a legislator who takes an oath to follow the laws of the state of Connecticut and the Constitution then vote for a bill that's a direct defiance of the very oath that they take? If it should be legalized, they need to do it in Washington first, because we cannot run afoul of the federal laws, otherwise we are not a nation of laws. That is the problem that we're facing. So let me just end by saying this. It isn't going to matter what I think up there. You need to get on the phones. You need to get on the emails. You need to call legislators in the town you live, legislators in the town where you work, legislator, your family and friends. Your voices will make a difference. If you look at that bill that's currently came out of general law, I believe that is the worst bill I've ever seen on so many levels. So many levels. A degradation of our cities, I would argue. You need to get a hold of your legislators that you know, hear of, friends and families, and make the call. This is where people's voices will change, and we will stop this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Craig Fishbein.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for your comments. You know, I want to especially thank the mayor because he did not take the position that it's bad. It's an open question. You know, the testing has not come back. You know, ultimately, I come down to the law, as Senator Fasano mentioned. You know, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution. When this country was created, we adopted the Supremacy Clause. It says if you create a federal law, the states are subservient to that at a certain level. It is within, the states don't have the power to just say, well, we don't like that one. You know, it seems to me that I think we fought a war many years ago and lost many of our citizens over just such an issue where certain states didn't like what the federal government was doing. And I really don't want to go back there. My position on the legalization of marijuana really irrelevant because it's in violation of the law. The other problem that nobody's mentioned is our public safety, is our police officers. I see that the chief is here today. One of the problems that Colorado has is that the only way to test someone who is perhaps suspected of operating under the influence is to draw their blood. There's actually a standard in the Colorado law. It's 0.06 parts per million, I believe, of THC. I've got a problem with that. And I did sponsor a bill in the legislature this year to create a task force to let's come up with some way to test for our public safety. So, those are generally my concerns. I just think we're rushing into this too much for the almighty dollar. And, maybe it happens in the future based upon testing, but at this point, I just don't see myself being in favor of it. So thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Craig. Craig Turner, Director of our Youth and Social Service Department. Craig.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. We have a couple more speakers because we're trying to represent the citizenry at large. Our next speaker is Todd Foster, who is a reverend from New Haven, Connecticut.
Typically, when we have an objective or a goal, the process involves ready, aim, and fire. But what I see happening here is that we've kind of reversed or screwed up the order, and now it's ready, fire, aim. We have a lot of information that has not been ascertained. We have a lot of question marks. We have a lot of maybes. And I'm here just to make the point as succinctly as I can that maybe isn't good enough. And I need your help a little bit today. When I point to you, I want you to be as loud as the proponents here and just shout the word with me, maybe, with a question mark on it. So maybe this marijuana experiment will go as many hope. Maybe lots of people will get rich and the state coffers will overflow. Maybe no one will have to suffer in the process. Maybe the legalization of pot will be the panacea to make racial disparities in the administration of justice go away. Maybe our black and brown communities won't catch the short end of the legalization stick. Maybe the road to Dr. King's beloved community is paved with weed. Maybe the black market will just disappear. But maybe, as has been the case in other places, they will simply become more dangerous, devious, and determined to survive by any means necessary. Maybe law-abiding folks who have latent tendencies toward addictive behaviors won't find their way into the new pot shops. Maybe their own curiosity and the proposed new marijuana legality won't collide. Maybe they won't fall into that bottomless pit of addiction. Maybe laws to keep THC-impaired drivers from behind the wheels of motor vehicles will be enough to keep us all safe on the highways. Maybe our insurance rates really won't go up. Maybe there won't be more fatalities, shattered families, funerals, and tears. Maybe those young people who are already heavy marijuana users won't feel the implicit nod to use even more. Maybe their motivational drive, dropout rates, attitude toward life, and capacity to achieve won't be affected. Maybe lawmakers won't just look the other way. Maybe those brightly colored, inviting candies laced with marijuana will be properly packaged, labeled, and kept away from children. Maybe all parents will be responsible to do their parts to keep their kids out of the emergency rooms. Maybe the fact that scientists are still debating whether marijuana is a causative or correlative factor in psychosis should give the rest of us pause until they know for sure. Maybe employers won't have to deal with more impaired, unproductive, and unsafe workers. Maybe employee-friendly companies can just start supplying their new hires with all the necessary equipment, training, and Cheetos. Maybe Maybe the cleverly disguised vaping devices finding their way into our schools in alarming numbers won't have high THC content marijuana cartridges in them. Maybe we should warn our young people what they could do to their brains. Maybe they will listen. Maybe all the hoped for financial gains associated with legalizing marijuana won't be offset by costs associated with treatment, injuries, loss of work, damage to property, etc. Maybe. Maybe our legislators will research the growing body of evidence for themselves and not allow the polls or the lobbyists to dictate a collective political moral conscience. Maybe they will wait for definitive data before even considering changing the laws. Maybe. Maybe big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco, and even big agriculture will curb their insatiable desire for profits and endeavor to do more to build our communities than they might otherwise do to pillage them in the name of pot profit potential. Maybe. It's a crapshoot, a toss of the dice, a mega $1,000,000 lotto dream. Maybe we will all be winners, but how much are we willing to bet? Whose lives are we willing to lay on the line? Maybe it will be worth it. Maybe. Maybe not.
State Representative Mary Mashinsky has joined us, and she has a few words to speak.
Good morning. I did talk to the Public Health Committee about this legislation and recommended to them, based on the latest science and medical information, that we should not be legalizing any other substances like marijuana for use under the age of 25. Because the brain development continues for a young person right up to age 25. And we know it does impair the way they process thoughts and the way they process information. And my feeling is, why harm a young person at the beginning of their fruitful life when their brain is still developing? If I got my wish, and I said to the Public Health Committee, I would also raise alcohol use to 25, and I would also raise cigarette and vaping use to 25 as well. They actually, to be consistent with the new medical information, everything should be age 25 and up. So if it does not include that precaution, I have told them I will be voting against the bill. And the most important thing in the world to me is to take care of young people and help them develop to be strong adults and help the community. I also have heard from employers who have said they might have to lay off 1/3 of their employees because they will fail the drug testing, which is required under their federal contracts. And that disturbs me as well. I hate to see people lose a job when they really need it. That's an unresolved issue too. And we still don't have a good test for impaired driving under marijuana. That's another concern for me. It is fairly easy to tell an impaired driver who is under the influence of alcohol, but it is not easy to tell if they are impaired under the influence of marijuana. So we do need to advance on that front. We need testing that allows us to make a good determination, allows the police to make a good determination whether someone's an impaired driver. We don't have that yet. I will tell you the district is split 50-50. I've polled the district twice on marijuana. Both times it came back exactly 50-50. So the town, my district anyway, is split on the issue. I'm polling them again this year to see if it's still the same. I suspect it will be. So at this point, I'm a no, and join the rest of my delegation in opposing legalization. And I do not plan to change my opinion unless we are beyond the age of brain development. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mashinsky. That's actually the perfect statement to the lead-in. The next segment of the population, one that we all have probably as much concern as any, our youth. And I want to invite Jordan Davidson to come up and speak on that issue. Jordan.
Hello. Those who tout marijuana as a fun, safe drug are advancing the agenda of the growing marijuana lobby, or Big Marijuana. Big Marijuana hopes that weed becomes legalized because legalization would allow the lobby to market marijuana and hold political influence. Legalization would give this industry license to manipulate the populace into using marijuana in a variety of forms, whether that be bud, edibles, oils, wax, on a frequent basis, just as big tobacco did with cigarettes in the 20th century. In fact, Altria, the parent company of Marlboro, bought a 45% stake in the largest marijuana distributor in Canada in December of 2016 on the heels of Canada's legalization of recreational marijuana. History is repeating itself, and not only are we falling again for this industry's deception and lies, we are also blindly embracing and encouraging them. My infatuation with marijuana started the summer before my senior year of high school. I discovered that smoking weed allowed me to have fun while suppressing my anxieties. I felt happier, laughed more, listened to music with a different pair of ears, enhanced my creativity, and even found a new set of friends whom everyone else called the stoners and potheads. I began to drive high, hide weed from my parents, and risk showing up at work with glassy eyes. I was proud of it all and thought that I loved my life. Getting high with friends at school upgraded my smoking experience to a level that I couldn't have imagined. We freestyle rapped, watched trippy TV shows, danced to throwback songs, and contemplated our own existence like those baked teenagers that you see in TV shows. I had fallen deeper in love with marijuana. At the start of the term, I told myself that I would only smoke on the weekends. Weekends turned to Wednesday afternoons, Wednesdays turned to Sunday afternoons, which turned to Thursdays, the night before the last night of the week, which turned to every single night, which turned to right before class, and at lunch, and at dinner. I convinced myself that math homework was easier stoned, that I could make a couple of decent points in humanities classes as long as I didn't look the teacher in the eyes, and that going to fitness class under the influence was no big deal. Eventually, it scared me to think that I would go a single day without being high. If I was out of weed, I would text anyone I thought might have some and just ask for one hit, or even show up at the room unannounced to see and hope that they might be there. If my close friends had marijuana and they weren't in their rooms, I chose to ignore my moral compass and steal their stash and put everything back just as it was to avoid all suspicion. I even offered to pay people a rent for a cartridge of marijuana THC oil for one night at nearly the whole price of what the full cartridge would have been. I rarely failed in my quest to get high because it felt like my life depended on it. I was willing to do whatever it took to get marijuana in any form. My behavior had devolved from being a stoner to a true addict, maybe even what people would call a junkie. I thought that junkies were only people who overdosed in back alleys from shooting heroin, but I was exhibiting desperate, addictive behavior. I had trouble coming to grips with the reality that I was no more than a junkie because I had never heard a stoner being called that. But I had graduated from being a pothead. My process of using couldn't have been normal for anyone of any age with any drug. When you become addicted to any substance or activity, it becomes your best friend and your worst enemy. You grow to care about your vice more than you do about your family, your friends, your education, your extracurricular activities, jobs, and at an extreme point, your own life. Your vice feels like a soulmate you refuse to leave, who repeatedly abuses you emotionally and physically. If you are lucky like I was, you can look at yourself in the mirror until you hate what is staring back at you so much that you need to stop. Yet, just like ending an important relationship or losing a loved one, you grieve the loss of your drug. So to any addicts in the crowd, anyone who has a family member struggling with addiction, anyone struggling to dig themselves out of their own grave, I am here, and there's a community of people who are here. Recovery is possible, as it was for me, and there's always hope. Weed ruined me, and as a society, we are encouraging more young people not only to use, but to abuse this substance without any of us understanding the real risks. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel because I stopped digging, and you and your loved ones can too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordan. So that's the piece that I have the most personal attachment to in the work I do, and it's to prevent that from ever happening. So anything that we can do to reduce the likelihood of that happening through reducing access or availability of drugs in any way, shape, or form when it's harmful to children is a significant event whenever we have the opportunity to do it. And we need to take that as seriously as the medical side, as seriously as the economic side, if not more so. To that end, I'm sure you're all aware that substance abuse and addiction not only affects an individual or the individual's family, but communities at large. That's been particularly true in Wallingford through the opioid epidemic, and as a result of that, we established a community coalition called the Community for a Better Wallingford, and I'm asking Ken Welch, the director of that coalition, to end this portion of the press conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you everybody that's here today. I'm going to be pretty short because I can't add much to what's been said. If you need information about this topic, you can go to our website, cbwlfd.org. There's a marijuana page there with all the research and all the experience you need to know to make a decision on this topic. And that's what it comes down to. That's the message. Do the research, get the facts, get the data, and you'll make up your mind. That's all we do in this coalition is we share information, and we've been able to make a difference in this community. I want to say a special thank you to Jordan because that's not an easy thing to do. For those of you that don't know, Jordan's 18 years old, and he's the reason we're here. I don't care what age you legalize this at. It's going to affect our youth. You can't stop it. Call your legislators, write letters, please. Get on the phone. We've got lists. We have a group of students here passing out information to help you contact the people that matter in this issue. Please put this off. Make those phone calls. And thank you for coming today.
So I would like to thank you above all for coming, and please take this opportunity to make a difference because we do know that it is the citizenry that makes the difference. We had one other state representative that we were eager to hear from, Vin Candelaria, who represents a portion of Wallingford and Guilford, but unfortunately he was unable to make it. But he has been at the front of this initiative. Definitely a no vote for those of you who care. You do not need to call him other than to just encourage him and let him know he has your support. And that is really the point of this meeting, to get the no, K-N-O-W vote out through a no vote at the Capitol this time around. If you weren't clear on what we said, this is not about being against the legalization of the drug in and of itself. It's about doing it responsibly and in alliance with the format and the process that we have used to approve drugs for decades in this country. And it just seems completely out of the norm to take the steps and the path we're choosing to do with marijuana. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy your day.